Beyond the Gates weekly preview March 9th to 13th. Vanessa is humiliated, Eva is proud, and Shanna supports her man. Next week, alliances will be tested, secrets will be at risk of exposure, and one character will be forced to face a very public fall from grace. The next round of Beyond the Gates spoilers will center on Vanessa's public humiliation. Meanwhile, Eva beams with pride over her mother, and Shanna steps up to support Ted professionally. The key points to remember are these. Vanessa suffers public embarrassment and misses out on an opportunity because of her connection to Joey. Eva glows with pride over her mother Leslie, while Shanna lends Ted her professional support. Grayson receives a threat. Jacob fears his true identity may be exposed, and Cot shocks everyone with her new living arrangement. There are some weeks in Fairmont Crest that do not begin with an explosion, but with a suffocating feeling that slowly seeps into every room, every glance. Every meeting that seems ordinary on the surface yet carries the scent of betrayal. Everything in these coming days feels as though it is standing on a sheet of thin ice, where one wrong step could shatter the entire frozen surface of secrets and drag down everyone still trying to protect their image, their power, their marriage, their reputation, and even their lives into the icy waters of truth. No one is truly safe anymore, not Bill, as he begins tracing the name Sammy like a thorn lodged deep inside his pride and suspicion. Not Haley, who understands that her silence is becoming a sentence hanging over her head. Not Joey, who stands at the center of a web of secrets, wise enough to know that the person who knows the most is often the one most likely to die first. And certainly not Jacob, who can feel the chill of living a double life for so long that he can no longer tell whether he is performing for others or lying to himself just to survive one more day. Bill is not seeking Joey out just to ask a few casual questions. A man like Bill does not lower himself to search for answers unless he feels that something is truly threatening his control. The existence of the name Sammy feels like a crack forming at the exact moment he was trying to believe that his marriage to Haley, however twisted and strategic it may be, still remained within a course he could control. But Bill is beginning to understand that this is no longer just marital conflict, nor is it simply one of those shadowy corners of the past that can be overlooked. This is something deeper, dirtier, and more dangerous. He is not turning to Joey because he trusts him, but because he knows Joey is the kind of man who always stands close to the truth without ever appearing bloody on the surface. Joey knows too much. He knows how to study the weaknesses in other people, and he knows how to wait until their fear has fully ripened before stepping in like a false savior. In that meeting, what rises is not merely suspicion about Haley, but the rage of a man realizing he may have become the last person to know what is happening in his own life. To Bill, that is harder to swallow than betrayal itself. It wounds his pride, and when Bill's pride is wounded, he does not go looking for justice. He goes looking for someone to punish. Haley, during these days, is no longer standing in the position of a woman who can slip past trouble with tears or softness. Every time Bill looks at her for 1 second too long, every time he asks a question in a tone that is too calm, Haley can feel the storm forming. The most frightening part is not Bill's anger, but the fact that Bill is withdrawing into himself to think. She knows Sammy is no longer a name that can be avoided forever. She also knows Joey may be holding far more than she ever imagined. That uncertainty is what tightens around her throat. She is not only afraid of the truth coming out, but of losing any control over how that truth will be used once it does. In this world, secrets do not kill people on their own. They only become weapons when they fall into the right hands. Haley is beginning to realize she may have been far too confident in believing she still held the knife by the handle. She stands between Bill and Joey as if trapped between two different forms of danger, one being possessive fury, the other the quiet cruelty of a man who always sees one move ahead. Meanwhile, Jacob is living almost entirely in a state of held breath. His fear that his true identity may have been exposed does not come from any clear evidence, but from survival instincts sharpened by too many days spent performing. A glance held just a little too long, a harmless-sounding question. A pause in conversation that lands wrong. Each of those can feel like a warning. That is what is breaking Jacob down. The most dangerous moment for a man living undercover is not when someone points directly at him, but when he has to grind down his own nerves because he cannot tell how much the other person knows. He tries to stay calm, tries to make every gesture look natural, but the harder he works to conceal himself, the more strained he feels. The fear of exposure is not just fear for himself. It stretches toward Naomi, toward the people he cares about, toward the cost of everything he has sacrificed in order to step into this darkness. If he truly has been discovered, the first person to pay the price may not even be him, but the people he wanted to protect. That thought leaves Jacob with no room for error. Yet when people are pushed too close to the edge, they do not necessarily become more precise, they become more panicked. Jacob's caution is beginning to resemble abnormal behavior, and that is what makes it so dangerous. Naomi sees in Chelsea something far more tangled than simple resentment toward Cod. She knows that bitter silence well, that way of looking away as if refusing to touch the issue might somehow stop it from exploding. That is why Naomi's advice is not just the advice of someone who wants peace. It is also the reaction of someone who can sense that the undercurrent is rising higher than anyone thinks. Naomi understands that when major secrets are moving beneath the surface, even the smallest fractures in relationships can be exploited and torn open into chasms that cannot be repaired. She wants Chelsea to reconcile with Cot not only out of care, but because her instincts are telling her that division right now would be a gift to whatever danger is approaching. But Chelsea is in the emotional state of someone who no longer knows whether she is truly angry at Cot because she was hurt, or because she's afraid Cot may have seen something too close to the truth. Sometimes people attack others not because they hate them, but because they are terrified. The more distance Chelsea keeps, the clearer it becomes that something inside her is deeply unsettled. Nicole senses that same offbeat tension in her daughter. As a woman who has lived through too many masks and too many forms of self-destruction disguised as pride, Nicole knows when a young person is standing in front of a painful choice they do not dare to name. That is why the advice she gives is not sweet, nor is it meant to soothe. It comes from the cold clarity of a mother who knows that loving a child does not mean letting them walk off a cliff while calling it freedom. Nicole can see the conflict inside her daughter, the clash between heart and pride, between the desire to be understood and the fear of being exposed. But the tragedy of honest advice is that it does not always bring salvation. Sometimes it forces the listener to stare directly at the thing they have been trying to avoid, and that is when it hurts the most. Nicole may save her daughter from one mistake, but she may also unintentionally push her toward a decision that costs her something precious. Elsewhere, Ashley tries to comfort Grayson as grief covers him like cold ash. On the surface, it looks like a familiar image of tenderness, of someone trying to shoulder the pain of a person she cares about. But beneath that, Ashley is beginning to feel that Grayson's pain is not entirely transparent. There is something in the way he grieves that unsettles her, as if the loss is not only making him collapse, but making him afraid. That fear is different from ordinary sorrow. It feels like the reaction of someone who is terrified that a certain door is about to be forced open. Ashley has no proof, no final conclusion, but suspicion does not always come through perfect logic. Sometimes it comes through a sense of emotional imbalance, through the intuition of a woman who notices that the pieces of feeling in front of her do not fit together. She is still there, still comforting him, still giving him the support he needs, but her softness is no longer untouched. And once trust is scratched, love begins to change color. The following day, Jacob enters full survival mode. He not only has to avoid being exposed, but also has to learn how not to let fear damage his cover. That forces him to turn himself into a more flawless performance than ever before, where every move must be measured. Yet the more perfect the performance becomes, the more artificial it risks looking. Someone is watching Jacob, perhaps an enemy, perhaps someone he once trusted, and the feeling of being seen through leaves him nearly breathless. Undercover life has stripped him of the ability to relax, turning every room into an interrogation chamber and every encounter into a test. Jacob's loneliness lies in the fact that he cannot tell the truth about his fear to the person who most needs to hear it. He must continue performing the role of a man in control, even while his mind keeps building one nightmare scenario after another. Donnie, meanwhile, stands in front of a photo shoot that should have been an opportunity to confirm her beauty, status, and place in the world, but instead becomes a mirror magnifying every insecurity. Her hesitation does not come only from image pressure. It comes from the fear that in a space flooded with light, what will be exposed is not just her face, but the cracks that cannot be hidden with makeup or perfect posture. For women like Donnie, the public has never been just an audience. They are a jury. One misstep, one moment of visible instability, one unwelcome appearance from the wrong person, and it could all become a blow against the reputation she worked so hard to build. She fears the photo shoot not because of the cameras, but because it could turn into the scene of a public unmasking. Smitty, meanwhile, gets pulled into an uncomfortable conversation with his mother-in-law where the words may not be shouted, but still have enough force to tear through the last layers of patience. The discomfort does not come merely from a difference of opinion. It comes from the fact that a long history of half-spoken disappointments and swallowed accusations exists between them. When adults in a family begin speaking in the tone of warning instead of love, it usually means they have already seen a danger that the people in the middle of it are not yet willing to face. Smitty is not just dealing with the weight of marriage and responsibility, but also with the feeling of being judged as not enough, not right, not strong enough to protect what he is supposed to keep safe. Vanessa realizes too late that involvement with Joey was never a harmless game. The opportunity she misses because of him is not simply a closed door, but a bitter reminder that every time she lets Joey move deeper into her orbit, she pays for it with something real. Perhaps at first Vanessa believed she was smart enough to touch fire without getting burned, that she could enjoy Joey's magnetic pull while still maintaining a safe distance. But Joey is not the kind of man other people get to control. He pulls, he shifts trajectories, he turns blurred boundaries into dependence before anyone realizes it. Vanessa begins to see that clearly when an important opportunity slips through her fingers. Worse still, she understands that this loss may only be the beginning. In the middle of all this chaos, Shanice appears beside Ted in a professional role, but even the things that look the cleanest and most proper can still complicate everything. Ted is the kind of man who hates showing weakness, so merely needing anyone's help is already enough to irritate him. Shanice enters that space with the calm of someone who knows she is useful, but the closeness that is born when people are at their most vulnerable is never simple. It can help a person stand tall again, or it can open a new emotional bond that neither side is prepared to face. And in Fairmont Crest, every new connection risks becoming a topic for judgment, suspicion, and exploitation. By midweek, tension explodes when Bill and Haley have an unpleasant confrontation with a member of the Dupree family. This is no longer awkward social discomfort, but a direct collision between two sides that have been quietly measuring each other for a long time. The Duprees have never been quick to forget, and they are even slower to forgive. If someone from that family chooses to look directly at Bill and Haley with full contempt or warning, then it is not merely personal conflict. It is a declaration that every debt is eventually collected. Haley is pushed into a corner where she must endure judgment, while also deciding whether to stay silent in order to survive or strike back to preserve what little dignity she has left. But striking back means exposing herself even more, while silence looks too much like surrender. That is exactly the kind of trap that erodes a person from the inside out. Kot spends time taking care of Anita, and within that devotion lies both genuine concern and a deep uneasiness she cannot fully name. Anita seems weaker than the family wants to believe. Her exhaustion no longer feels temporary, and Cop begins to realize that older members of the family sometimes hide the truth about their condition not to protect others, but to protect the strong image they once held. Cop remains at Anita's side not just as a caring relative, but as someone listening for something that has not yet been spoken aloud. Maybe Anita knows a piece of the truth. Maybe she is staying silent because she fears the family will fracture even more if she speaks. Either way, the atmosphere around her bedside becomes almost impossible to breathe in. At the same time, Joey assigns Marcel a special task. And the terrifying thing about tasks like that is always the fact that the one giving the order does not want blood on his own hands. Marcel may be a right-hand man, or he may just be a living shield being pushed out in front when things go wrong. Joey is far too familiar with using the loyalty of others as a tool, but in power structures like this, no one remains only a tool forever. Every task handed out is also a test, a reminder that Marcel's value in Joey's eyes is tied directly to how youthful he still is. Once that usefulness runs out, loyalty will not be rewarded with anything except sacrifice. The return of the Anna bride does not bring a warm sense of reunion. It feels more like an old door being forced open, letting dust, noise, and memories long kept locked away rush back in. Families do not always heal when someone returns. Sometimes a return simply exposes everything that was never resolved in the first place. Deanna walks back into the home carrying not just luggage, but the weight of the past, and the people still there are forced to confront how much they buried beneath the surface of artificial peace. Then comes Mona's discovery of Randy and Lynette in a situation that is both filthy and humiliating, something explosive enough to become the spark for a true scandal. In a place where reputation is always pressed smooth and displayed like an achievement, moments of ugliness, both literal and symbolic, carry a special kind of destructive force. Mona now holds not just a disgusting image in her mind, but an opportunity. Whether she keeps it hidden or exposes it is no longer simply a question of morality, but of power. The person who knows first is usually the one with the advantage. The next day, Vanessa is publicly humiliated as if every ounce of confidence, glamour, and effort she put into maintaining her image has been stripped away in front of a crowd. What makes this humiliation hurt even more is not the number of witnesses, but the fact that it happens after she has already sacrificed too much because of Joey. This could be consequence or it could be sabotage. But for Vanessa, the feeling of being left emotionally naked in front of others is enough to make it a wound that will not heal easily. Reputation does not collapse in a single day, but it can begin rotting from one moment. The most painful part is that she does not know whether Joey will protect her or simply step back and watch her struggle through the wreckage the way he so often does with people caught in his orbit. Eva, on the other hand, expresses pride in Leslie, and that sounds beautiful and troubling at the same time. Because with Leslie, success is never entirely innocent. If Eva is proud, then Leslie may have just achieved something major, but it could just as easily be the result of manipulation so skillful that outsiders mistake it for a legitimate triumph. The more Leslie shines, the more people should be asking who she had to step over in order to reach that position. A woman like Leslie is most dangerous when she is being praised, because admiration only convinces her more deeply that every tactic she used was justified. Donald finds himself in conflict with his twin sister, a form of tension that always cuts deeper because it comes from a reflection of oneself. Between people who share the same blood, lies are sharper and betrayal is harder to forgive because it wounds not just trust but identity. Who is lying, who is hiding the truth, and who is the one truly hurt are all mixed together into a knot of emotions where neither side remains completely innocent. Keel appears with useful advice, but sometimes the most valuable warnings come from someone who saw the danger before everyone else. If Keel is cautioning someone, it means he has already pieced together fragments that others have not yet noticed. But the tragedy of timely advice is that it is not always taken. And in Fairmont Crest, many people only realize the value of a warning after it is too late to change course. Cott then stunned Chelsea and Tomas by announcing her new living arrangement. This is not merely a housing decision. It is a strategic move, a declaration that she is no longer standing still waiting for other people to decide where she belongs. Where Cott chooses to live, with whom, and for what reason immediately shifts the balance of relationships around her. Chelsea may be shocked out of concern, or because she feels herself losing access. Tomas may see in Cott's decision a sign that she is moving farther away from the old orbit. Cott's new home is therefore not just an address. It is a statement, a new boundary, the first step in a dangerous rearrangement of the board. By the end of the week, Joey softens his voice with Vanessa as he opens up about his family. But with a man like Joey, sincerity and manipulation always wear faces that look far too similar. He may truly be revealing a piece of his private darkness, or he may be using his wounds to soften Vanessa, to make her forget the humiliation, the loss. The fact that he drew her into a chain of complications with no escape. Vanessa is left facing a choice that is deeply feminine but also deeply cruel, to believe that there is a wounded man behind Joey who deserves understanding. Or to accept that every confession is just silk-draped over calculation. The cruelest part is that sometimes people realize they are being manipulated in the very moment they still want to believe. Cott and Donald quietly exchange information, and whatever information requires that kind of caution must be something significant. It could destroy a reputation, break an alliance, or push someone into a corner with no return. Cott is no longer just a girl reacting from emotion. She is learning how to pursue truth with a colder mind, and that makes her more formidable than before. Donald is not innocent either when he chooses to share what he knows. When two people hold dangerous information together, they do not just become temporary allies. They become a threat to anyone surviving through secrecy. Martin, meanwhile, chooses to confide in Vernon, perhaps because there are some things a man can only say to someone experienced enough not to judge him immediately. Martin is carrying a burden too heavy to keep bearing alone. But Vernon is the kind of man who protects the people he loves by telling them to face consequences, not by helping them hide. That means opening up to Vernon also means risking the possibility of hearing a truth Martin is not yet ready to accept. Then Grayson receives a threat. For a man already unstable, that threat is not just an attack from the outside, but fuel thrown onto every fear already burning inside him. It forces people to wonder whether Grayson is a victim of something or whether he is being hunted because of what he himself has done. His past, his work, the secrets he buried, any of it could now be coming back to collect a debt. And when a man is both grieving and panicked, he can become dangerously unpredictable, not just to others, but to himself. Finally, Derek and Naomi have an honest conversation about Ashley's love life. And that kind of honesty would not happen unless they believed something was truly wrong. They may fear Ashley is loving the wrong person, or worse, that she is being pulled into a relationship that will not only wound her emotionally but drag her into a spiral of secrets and threats. The saddest truth is that the person in the middle of it is often the last one to see it clearly. Ashley may believe she is holding on to love, but from the perspective of those standing outside with clearer eyes. She may be walking step by step into a trap disguised as tenderness and wounded vulnerability. And that is exactly what makes this week on Beyond the Gates feel so dangerously suffocating. No one is simply loving or hating anymore. No one is simply hiding or searching for the truth anymore. Every emotion has become entangled with power, shame, pride, old debts, and fresh agendas. Bill is moving closer to retaliation. Haley stands on the brink of being exposed from multiple directions. Joey continues playing his game of influence over everyone around him. Jacob could collapse because of a single misplaced glance. Vanessa is tasting the bitter consequences of trusting the wrong man. Cott is no longer passive. Ashley is caught between affection and suspicion. And the secrets shifting beneath every relationship now feel like buried explosives, waiting only for the right footstep to set them off. When these people finally collide, what falls apart will not just be a relationship or a lie, but the entire fragile order they built from reputation, money, and the illusion of control. And when the truth finally comes into the light, perhaps the most terrifying realization will not be who betrayed whom, but the fact that many of them no longer even know whether they are fighting to protect love or merely to protect the darkest part of themselves.